In this tutorial, I'm going to take you through a shop-friendly, step-by-step process on a look for a client or a model who doesn't necessarily want sharpness, but still wants cleanliness, texture, and natural softness. I'm locating the crown and assessing the natural growth patterns. These are some of our fix factors. I'm using quite an organic sectioning pattern here and relying on the natural direction of the hair to dictate my zone selection. As you can see here, I'm choosing zones that ride just above the contour of the head, which is the widest point of the side of the head. So you can see here from the completed zone selection, we've got quite an offset crown, and I've used that to dictate my zone. I'm starting this haircut above the ear. This gives me a brilliant transition point to decide my lengths and adjust my technique as I work to the front of the head and the back of the head. In my opinion, this is the safest place for me to start. With my technique here, my fingertips are pointing towards the ceiling and my knuckles towards the head. This is creating graduation. This is now set up my guideline length for the front and the back. The reason I moved to the front and the back afterwards is because at the front hairlines, the hair becomes a lot weaker, and at the back, we can run into all sorts of growth patterns and fix factors that we have to adjust our method and technique to work around. I'm splitting each previous section in half and using that half of the section as a guideline for my new section. Each new section is no wider than the width of my comb. As I get to the front of the head here, I'm using over direction to ensure that I don't remove too much density from the front hairline. I'm going to repeat this process around this side of the head, as this is the direction that the hair grows around this side of the head. As you can see, I'm using a forward graduation technique. This means that the section pattern that I'm choosing uses diagonally forward lines towards the front of the head. This is because these types of sections lend themselves to hair that wants to live towards the front of the head. If I was using graduation to style this hair to the back of the head, I would use sections that move in a diagonal back direction, as that would encourage the hair to move backwards. So I'm going to repeat the process on the other side, mimicking the same method and technique from the previous side. You can see I started above the ear, worked towards the front hairline, and then I worked around the back of the head. One key difference here is that I was using diagonal back sections around the right hand side of the client's head. This is because I was following the growth patterns of the hair. Once I finish both sides and I'm happy with balance, I'm going to move on and release the clips in the top. The first decision I have to make is on choice of length and choice of shape. I'm going to start this process by creating a guideline through the center of the head, no wider than the width of the comb. The shape I'm choosing on the top here is a slight triangle. As you can see with the hairline, it grows quite a long way down the front of the head, so I already get a lot of extended length at the front of the head. To maximize the impact and texture of this haircut, I'm still taking it slightly shorter towards the apex. I'm also using a point cutting technique here. Once again, to maximize the texture in the ends of this haircut. This will make a lot more sense when it comes to the styling process and the finished look. I'm choosing to complete one side of the top of the head at a time. This is so I can keep the haircut nice and organized, and I can also reduce as many variables as possible. This will ensure that I create as balanced result as possible. As you can see here, I'm pulling the hair towards me. This is because, again, I'm reducing as many cutting variables as possible. I'm going to check this side for balance before I move on to the other side of this zone. I'm going to repeat the exact same process on the opposite side. As I mentioned before, this time you'll notice that I'm finding my guideline and pushing the hair towards the center using the fine teeth of the comb. The fine teeth give me lots of control throughout this zone, and pushing the hair towards the center mimics the cutting mechanics that I used on the opposite side. And the reason that I'm cutting from front to back is because I want to prioritize the length at the front, and that has acted as my guideline for the choice of length throughout this zone. Much like before, I'm cross-checking this section for balance before I move on to the next part of the haircut. While I was cutting the layering, I was using a point cutting technique. This was because I'm not going to do any texturizing when the hair is dry. All of the texture and movement in this scenario needs to be added while it's wet. So for this next process, I'm going to open up some deeper channels with a croc scissor. And again, I'm going to use a point cutting technique using the wide teeth of the comb with a slightly deeper cut. This opens up purposeful gaps and channels throughout the haircut to further enhance the styling process and the finished result. You can see here I'm clipping away each texturized section to make sure that I don't overcut any section. I'm adjusting the length of the fringe with a razor. Once again, this does two things at once. It reduces length and ensures I keep some texture. I'm using the rule of thirds to decide how deep I go with my razor. Do I work in the end thirds, the mid thirds, or closer to the root? I'm choosing to work on the ends as I want to retain the density internally and create a soft, textured edge externally. So that's the cutting of the top complete. I'm going to add my styling product midway through this haircut, and my choice of product here is a matte finish styling balm. I'm going to warm the product through the palms of my hands and ensure that I apply from roots to tips throughout this whole zone. Before I go and start heat styling, I'm going to ensure that I comb the hair back into the direction that I want it to live. This ensures that the cuticles are laying in the correct direction and ensures that the hair stays in maximum health. To start with, I'm using my Dyson Supersonic with the concentrator nozzle and compacting the sides down with a paddle brush. Once I'm happy with how the contour is looking and the perimeter edge, I'm going to go through the top and scrunch dry the hair with a gentle air attachment to encourage natural gaps and pockets throughout the whole top zone. As you can see, this encourages a lot of the natural texture and lends itself to the cutting techniques that I've already used. I'm going to get the top to about 70% dry and then switch my hairdryer to a cool setting to cool it down. Moving on to the clipper work, my first guard of choice is a number 3. Firstly, I'm going to clipper in a downwards motion. This is going to debulk the contour of the head on the widest points of the head. Next up, I'm going to use number 3 and open the lever so it turns it into a 3.5. I'm working to the widest point of the head, which is the occipital bone. Next, I'm going to close the lever to a true 3. In the neckline here, I'm using a true descending technique, and my next guard of choice is a 1.5 guard with the lever fully open. This acts like a number 2. For this technique, I'm going to stick to cutting one panel of the back at a time. This gives me a reference point for the rest of the taper. My next guard of choice is a number 1 with the lever fully open. I'm going to work this length just below my 1.5 guard fully closed. Once I get to this point of the haircut, I'm just looking for an even and balanced colour spread. I switch to the number 1 fully closed, and then I take the guard off and open the lever with an open blade. And from this point, I gradually close the blade until I'm happy with the colour spread and I reach my shortest length, which is 0. You might notice that I haven't used any 0 lines as a guideline here. This is because I want to ensure that this look retains its natural softness. Once I'm happy with the colour spread in the neckline, I'm going to go ahead and line up the neckline. I'm using a little bit of scissor over comb here with a wide teeth just to soften the transition point from a number 3 to my graduation. Next, I'm going to create my earline. This adds an element of cleanliness around the earline. I'm keeping the hairline as low as possible, utilizing the natural hair growth patterns. I'm also going to be utilizing the natural growth throughout the front and enhancing this shape with a square sideburn. This gives this look a more classic feel and, in my opinion, an everyday feel. I'm going to use my foil shaver here to clean up any leftover hairs. I'm going to repeat the whole process on the other side. Remembering I'm not using any guidelines here. This ensures that this haircut doesn't look too artificial. I'm using a true descending technique from a 3, moving down to the 1.5, to the 1, and then to no guard, moving down to a 0. As with all haircuts, we use the 80-20 rule. I get my haircuts to about 80% complete, and then I leave 20% in the tank for the refinement process. This is where I can put the finishing touches on the haircut. Much like before, I'm using techniques such as scissor over comb and point cutting to soften, sharpen, and refine any edges and transition points throughout this haircut. I'm choosing to add some extra texture and movement here around the contour of the head and the wide points of the head where density tends to build. I'm using the wide teeth of the comb to pick up the hair, and much like the top, I'm using a point cutting technique with my croc scissors to keep a natural softness and openness to this haircut. Once I'm happy with how the haircut's looking, I'm going to finish off this look by adding a texture powder to the look to create a naturally textured and soft everyday look. I'm using my fingertips and the wide teeth of the comb to enhance this look and place the hair for the final finishing touches of the styling process. And that's the finished look, a naturally soft and textured haircut for the everyday wearer. Thanks for watching.